I am Bridget Nimmer, teacher at Nicolay High School. I've been here since 2008, but I've been teaching since 1995. So back in 2004, I applied for a grant, a teacher grant that was given by this organization that's called the National Endowment for the Humanities. So it's a government funded program that gives money for like cultural and educational development. The grant was to study the Pearl Harbor attack at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. And through just a series of serendipitous events, I was supposed to be on one flight and it got bumped, and then I ended up on this connection that was going through Minneapolis, St. Paul. I ended up switching seats in first class so this kid could sit next to his mother, and I just weirdly ended up in an empty seat. And then at the last minute, a woman came on the airplane and her arm was in traction. And I was like, she definitely is sitting next to me. And sure enough, she did. And then as we were descending into LA, she like stopped herself and she said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I've been talking about myself this whole time. I didn't ask why you were flying to LA." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm actually connecting. I'm going to Honolulu. I'm a teacher. I'm going to study the Pearl Harbor attack at the USS Arizona Memorial in Pearl Harbor." And she was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Like, I was just going through my dad's things with him a couple of days ago because he had early stages of Alzheimer's and was beginning to forget things." She's like, "We came across something from the war that I want you to have." She like briefly described what it was, but I didn't quite get it. And so I just got off the airplane. She asked for my like hotel address. I gave it to her, which now in retrospect was like not very safe, but I gave it to her anyway. She seemed very trustworthy. And then 2 days later, I'm in this like Waikiki hotel, and I walk into my room and there's this like FedEx box on my bed, and I'm like, what is this? Like, I kind of forgot about the whole conversation, and I open it up and out I pull in a plastic sheet bag is this beautiful silk flag. And the flag was the Japanese flag, and it had on it all of these well wishes in Japanese and prayers and symbols, which I clearly did not understand, but I knew, but there also were bloodstains on this, and I knew what this flag was. I had done enough research to know about the war in the Pacific, to know that Japanese soldiers would be given these flags as a good luck charm, and it was tucked into their breast pocket with like well wishes and prayers for them to come home safely. That this was something that US GIs knew existed on Japanese soldiers, so that if one was killed or found dead or you had killed them, it was something that you looked for almost as, I hate to say it, like a souvenir. And so Anne Cunningham, the woman I was sitting next to, was not sure how her dad came to own this, or if the person he had taken it from was somebody that he had killed in combat. All she knew that he was in the Philippines at Leyte Gulf in 1944, which is when the United States and the Allies had reclaimed the Philippines after losing it in 1942. She knew he was there, but she didn't know the circumstances of how he came to own the flag. But now it was in my possession, and I was like, what am I going to do with this thing? And I felt so uncomfortable and overwhelmed, but I was satisfied and very relieved that I was actually attending a conference where there was a lot of professors from the University of Tokyo, as it turned out. So I brought it to my next session, and this professor, whose name escapes me right now, but he was like, "What are you doing with this?" And I was like, I don't know. I sat next to this woman on the plane, and I was like trying to tell him the whole scoop, and he's like, "Okay." So he laid it out, and we determined the name of the young man whose flag it belonged to, and his name was Masuo Suga. And I kind of enlisted this professor to help me find Masuo Suga. Now, obviously, Masuo was probably deceased at that point. That's why the flag was in my possession. But I had these dreams of like finding his family and like returning this flag in this big ceremony. And so he said, "Sure, I'll help you." So he went back to Tokyo. This is after the conference was over. And he and I were in communication for like 6 months afterwards. And he looked up, the other thing that was on the flag was the neighborhood in which he lived. Like, it was clear that he, like in Milwaukee, it would be like Bayview or Lower East Side or something like that. So he was able to kind of go through phone book data, but he said Suga is like Smith in Japanese. And so the pages of Suga was just so overwhelming that he just felt like it was kind of a fool's errand to try and find the owner of this flag. He also thought that this young man was a young man who was not married and did not have a wife or children, and that it was very possible that all of his relatives were now deceased. So he said, I would just hold on to it yourself. And I was like, okay, it didn't turn out how I hoped it would. But I had contacted a couple of people that were archivists in museums, and they said, listen, we'll take it, but it's probably not going to be on display, because a lot of World War II museums and just general paraphernalia museums have lots of these, and they don't have the space to display them all. And so it was advised to me that I probably would get more out of it if I just framed it and kept it myself. So I decided to do that. One of my very good friends owns a framing gallery in Whitefish Bay, and so she beautifully framed it for me, and now it hangs in my study area of my house. And I bring it in every year to show my students both the power of like artifacts and the history and the story that they hold, but also the importance of talking to people and getting to know their stories, because everybody has one, and every family's story was impacted by our history in such a unique way that it's, worth striking up a conversation and asking them about